As hundreds of wildfires continue to burn across the country, major cities miles away from the activity are dealing with smoke blanketing their skies. Ottawa, Belleville, and Kingston, Ontario are posting some of the worst air pollution levels in the country. This is due to drifting smoke from forest fires. And with more than 200 forest fires burning in only Ontario and Quebec alone, Environment Canada is forecasting poor air quality will persist into the weekend. Special air quality statements remain in effect for major areas of both provinces. The wind has also carried smoke from the fires southward, triggering air quality alerts throughout the United States. Joining us now to give us more insight into the health impacts of wildfire smoke and how to stay safe is Dr. Joe Vipond, an emergency physician and past president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. Dr. Vipond, thank you again for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's important.
Definitely. Now, the impact from these raging wildfires can now be seen and felt in cities miles away, even in the U.S. So other than the cities we mentioned in southern Ontario, where else can we see air quality advisories in place in Canada?
Well, it seems to be a lot across the eastern areas of both Canada and the United States, which is different from what we're used to, right? Like the reason why this is a news story is because typically this is a Western phenomenon: Vancouver, Calgary, Oregon, California, and yet this time it's impacting the very heavily populated East, and so I think that's why everybody's eyes are on that area.
Definitely. And what actually triggers an air quality alert in the first place? How do officials measure air quality?
Well, my understanding is that they're really looking at these really tiny particles called PM 2.5. And these are the very, very small particles that float through the air. We know they have immense health impacts. So we know this mostly from like coal combustion studies where, coal and other combustion of fossil fuels, they've looked at the air pollution impacts on humans. And these particles are so fine that they actually get in through the lungs, through the small tubes in the lungs into the blood vessels, and that's why they're so dangerous, is because they can have health impacts throughout the entire body. They cause things like strokes, they cause things like heart attacks. Of course, the thing that we most think about is the irritation of our lungs, making us cough, making us feel bad, but there are serious health impacts as well.
Some very concerning health impacts indeed. Now, what are the demographics that may be most at risk in terms of exposure to these tiny particles?
Those people who have pre-existing health conditions, asthma, COPD, of course, have the pulmonary impacts. And then the smallest of people, children, have impacts because they breathe quite a bit faster and inhale more into their lungs than most adults. So they also play outside, right? So they have a higher exposure rate. And then, of course, those people who are in the older demographics as well, because they're just more vulnerable physiologically to these kind of impacts.
So what are some of the safety measures that can be taken to protect yourself from this drifting wildfire smoke if you have to go outside? Because we're hearing advice to avoid going outside during air quality alerts. But if you have to go outside, what are some safety measures people should take?
Well, there's only one thing you can do if you're going outside, and that's wear a really good quality mask. And so that only thing that describes that is a respirator mask. These are the same masks that are most useful when it comes to protecting yourself from COVID. They're the ones that fit very tightly to your face, and they will be adequate to filter out the vast majority of those small, fine particles and keep them from getting into your lungs and hence into your bloodstream. Now, when you're indoors, there are also things you can do to keep yourself safe indoors. And one thing would be to replace your filter in your furnace with a high quality MERV 11, preferably MERV 13 filter or higher. That's what you can get from your local hardware store. Run your filter constantly. So the fan on your furnace constantly, not having it heat or cool, just having that air constantly recirculate through that filter will help. And if there are certain areas of your house that aren't getting adequate circulation, you can put in these portable HEPA filters. That's these particulate filters that you can buy at your local hardware store as well. And that can clear a room quite well. And those are a little bit on the expensive side. You can make those yourselves by Googling Corsi Rosenthal box, CORSI box, and you'll be able to see some materials you can use with furnace filters and a box fan, something you can put together for about $100 in about 30 minutes.
Some very helpful advice there, Dr. Vipond. Thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. All right, we'll be right back after a short commercial break, but stay tuned because when we return, we're going to be taking a look at a recent study that concluded that the Arctic could be free of summer ice as early as 2030. We'll have more on that study and, of course, news from around the world coming up next, so stay tuned. We'll be back.